if you're drinking a beer in the street, first of all, nobody cares. Second of all, if somebody did care, they'd say, oh, can you please not do that? And you say, oh, okay, no problem. But they're not going to come up and assault you and, with attack dog, whatever.
Welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Clair.
Hey friends, glad to have you back here today at the OLOLP, Lions of Liberty podcast. If you can believe it, this is the 150th episode of this program. How exciting. I'm not going to make a whole hoopla. We're not going to spend a whole episode celebrating this semi-milestone, but 150, it's a cool number. So, hey, you can find today's show notes, of course, at lionsofliberty.com/150. And before we get rolling with today's guest, I want to briefly mention our sponsors, starting with our friends at LibertyManiacs.com, your home for awesome Liberty and satirical gear, t-shirts, mugs, bumper stickers, you name it, you can get it all for 10% off your entire order by using the discount code Lions of Liberty. And if you're tired of dealing with the bureaucratic quagmire that has become health insurance under the ACA, fret no more and check out an exciting alternative from our friends at Health Excellence Select. To learn more, head over to lionsofliberty.com/health. My guest today is a writer and investment consultant based out of San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, where he is the founder of the Borderless Blog and online community, and he co-hosts the Borderless Podcast, both of which focus on providing practical information for those interested in traveling, investing, and living abroad. Mr. James Guzman, welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
James, you're a pretty well-traveled guy, and I'm looking forward to sharing with our readers why you currently live outside the United States, why you run this website and podcast, Borderless, based around that very concept. And you guys are often talking about traveling and living abroad in the context of liberty. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself first? How did you become an international man, so to speak, and also how did you become a libertarian?
To start out with, I right out of high school, I joined the Navy. I was in the Navy for 4 years. I was part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I was on board a ship. And then after, 4 years, I don't know, that really did not sit well with me. Just with my personality and everything, I did not see that as some sort of a lifetime choice, a career path. So anyways, I got out and I started in real estate. I was with a friend of mine and I had bought a piece of real estate while I was in the Navy in Virginia Beach, and it had gone way up in value, so I doubled down, and I bought some other rental properties, and then at a young age, I had my first disaster there with the housing crisis, right? So I lost all my properties and the business that I was working. All of a sudden, I had no more clients, and trying to look for solutions and figure out what had happened here, because, before my, economic advice was, kind of just buy real estate and hold it and listen to Jim Cramer on CNBC and get and then you're going to be rich, right?
That's right. It's that simple.
Right. Just watch TV and you'll be rich. But, I started to ask questions when that happened. And one person that I started to listen to a lot at that time was Peter Schiff. I looked at some of his videos, and he kind of brought me into, this is the same time a lot of people got kind of brought into the whole Ron Paul called the Levolution. And so then I got into that, and I decided, you know what, I need to go study business. So I used my GI Bill. I said, well, if I'm going to study business, I'm going to study international business. If I'm going to study international business, I'll go internationally. So I went to Madrid, Spain, and I studied there. And funny enough, first day of school, the head of economics there, he writes on the board a quote, I believe it was from Hayek. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God. So I went up and started talking, and we became very good friends. I just kind of looked out and had a economics teacher there who was also affiliated with the Mises Institute. So that was great. And we became friends. We started a Students for Liberty in Europe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Wolf and Lauer. I had an economics club in college, and then that turned into Students for Liberty, and then I was always just kind of doing it for fun, so I just gave it to Wolf, and it has turned into this huge behemoth. But I believe we were the first ever Students for Liberty in Europe. So anyways, then I went to Mises Institute there in Auburn, and then I worked for Euro Pacific Bank in Barbados. Then I went to Acapulco, and I was selling condos there. and writing for some different publications, and also managed condos. And now I moved here to San Miguel de Allende, which is a much more kind of laid back lifestyle. And now I have my blog and podcast, which I've just been concentrating on my own.
So what inspires you to do that, to take your own experiences traveling abroad and realizing that you can really expand your own personal freedom and live a great life overseas? What inspired you to take that and found the Borderless community and the podcast?
Well, I when I first heard about the, flag theory and stuff like this, I don't know if your audience is familiar with it, but kind of the idea that, if the best way to achieve liberty is by setting up different flags in different countries, and in that way you can actually lower the amount of government in your life. And I think that that's true. And when I first heard about that, and also kind of the idea of traveling always appealed to me. I is what you call the third culture kid. I grew up around different cultures. My father was Puerto Rican and my mother's from Wisconsin, and I had I was around different people.
Those are indeed different cultures.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I was kind of open to that idea, and and I still do. I think that it's the best way if you really want a practical way that you can live a free life, and not just lowering the amount of government in your life, but, making money and being able to live a higher standard of living with that money, living in a place with a low cost of living, and just living in places that you enjoy living, that has the freedoms that you like. So I still think it's a very good strategy. And there's a lot of, practical things that people need to know in order to do this. And so, that's what I try to do with the Borderless blog, Borderless podcast, is try to get out practical advice for people. How do I do this? How do I make money in different countries? How do I get a residency in a different country, get a citizenship? All these different kinds of questions. How do I, invest in real estate in a different country? These are all things that you can do. It just takes, good advice, because there's lots of bad advice out there.
James, I always focus on liberty and libertarian principles and how people can expand their personal liberty, but what are some general reasons that people, not even just libertarians per se, but anybody that might stumble upon this, maybe some fascists happen to listen to today's show, and what are some political persuasion aside is what I'm saying, what are some general reasons that people might want to consider, people living in the United States or even elsewhere right now, might want to consider looking around the world and searching out other locations to live and work in?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because, my show is not overtly libertarian at all. Although me and my co-hosts are both definitely libertarians, we don't, it's not front and center in our podcast. We don't talk a lot about it, and it's, it's not really necessary. It's not necessary for you to agree on, everything politically, to understand that, living a life beyond borders, that living up to your true potential is what everybody wants to do, just on a practical basis. I think, there are a lot of leftists that would be, that are open to that, kind of part of the digital nomad, this movement that's going on. It's just a product of technology, and through people's own self-interest, they like the idea of being able to live whatever they like, and whether they like to admit it or not, a lot of people like the idea of paying less in taxes, while they're doing that. So.
Very much so. And you recently participated in a debate with Carla Gericke of the Free State Project, sort of tackling this question, and you talked about it on a recent podcast as well. We'll link to all this stuff in today's show notes. But basically tackling this idea of, should liberty lovers leave the United States, and purely focusing that on sort of advancing the ideas of liberty. Now, Carla and other people will say, we got to all move to New Hampshire. That's the way to do it. You don't want to stay here. You don't want to run away. You want to fight here in the United States for liberty. Whereas you took the sort of other position where, not saying you can't do that, but sort of, well, look, there are other ways to do that too. So can you just kind of lay out sort of your side of that? Why liberty lovers shouldn't just necessarily focus on, let's say, New Hampshire or just staying in the United States to quote unquote fight for liberty?
Well, to me, it's hard for me to even understand that. I think that is a kind of collectivist mentality to start with, that we need to all get together and try to, change the government. I mean, I don't see how anybody they're going to get together and change the federal government of the United States. I just don't see any scenario where that would make an impact. And I don't know. I have a finite time on this earth, and I'd like to live it actually enjoying myself and living a life of freedom. I mean, I do. where I live now and where I go and visit, I have a pretty free life, especially compared to the United States. I don't have hardly any, presence of the cops or any, other types of things like that. I pay less in taxes and I do what I want to now. This is not something that I'm thinking about, maybe, 10 years in the future, if we do the exact right thing in some scenario that I don't even understand how it will work. I mean, it's just such a mess and such a circus. I mean, I look at this, I think it's very obvious today, especially if you look at like the presidential elections. I know you guys, I've heard you kind of talking about some stuff with the elections and Rand Paul and stuff like that. But it just seems like such a circus. I mean, it's kind of fun to look at and talk about, kind of, I don't know, like a UFC match or something, but I just don't see any scenario where it's anything that I want to get involved in where I think anything positive can come out of it. So I just want to get as far away of that as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the way a lot of us here at Lions of Liberty sort of view that. We do see it as sort of a circus, but it also provides an opportunity to discuss the ideas of liberty because so many people are singularly focused on elections, so it gives us a chance to say, hey, look what these clowns are talking about. This stuff is bad, and so we like to have fun and poke a lot of fun of it, but anybody that sort of puts all their marbles on a presidential election or even like a Senate election, I mean, I think they're going to be sorely disappointed at the end of the day.
I just think that if you really look at, how societal changes usually come about, it's normally kind of just the practical basis, especially when it comes to technology. There's a lot of talk about, us going into this information age, or all the things that are available to us can change the way that society kind of structures itself. And I think that just showing people that you can have, more freedom in your life and have a better standard of living by doing these things, people are going to go for that. I don't think they necessarily need to read, Man, Economy, and State to understand that, they like living, on the beach and having a job that they can work whenever they want and pay less in taxes and just live relatively free. I think that no matter what their political persuasion, they probably like that idea. So that I think that is something that really brings about change.
Yeah, and on that subject of living more free, I mean, one thing I've noticed traveling, I've done some traveling in Central America, South America, Asia, and one thing you mentioned before is the police. And there's one thing I notice in other countries is that the attitude of police is almost singularly unique in the United States, or maybe it's the attitude of the citizenry towards the police. It kind of goes both ways, but, if I see a cop behind me in the U.S., I'm nervous no matter what I'm doing. I mean, it just, even if I'm squeaky clean, which of course I always am, but, you have that mentality because maybe it's just because we see so many instances of police abuse, or maybe because we know police are always pulling people over for petty stuff. But when I travel abroad, it seems like a completely opposite scenario. I mean, the citizens aren't afraid of the police anywhere I've been in all these countries. I mean, even when you've got police on corners, they're smiling and they're not a threatening presence. You actually do generally feel that they're there to protect you and not there to get after you. So, I mean, why do you think that there's such that difference? I mean, I'm sure you've noticed a similar thing, traveling all over the world, but why do you think the attitude towards policing is so different? I don't know how to say it, but totalitarian-ish here in the United States.
Yeah. I don't think that people realize unless they leave how much of a police state it is. As I was growing up, I used to, I've never been a big one for the rules, and so I used to, get in the regular things. Oh, whatever, you're drinking a beer on the street or something, I think, I don't know what percentage of young people get arrested or get in trouble with the police, but I'm sure it's a huge amount in the United States because there's just so many different violations that you can make for something stupid, and then it drags on, and you got to pay it some amount, and then you got to go to court, and then you got to and so I've kind of seen that and known that in the United States, and I'll tell you, it absolutely is different. I don't care what anybody says, it's different. Now, if you go to some place like Singapore or something, then that's also a police state, but I could go down a vast majority of the places. So I could say where I live now, where everybody says, oh, it's so horrible, in Mexico, in San Miguel de Allende. I can tell you right now, you do not get that. And you have to really, if you steal something or assault somebody or something like that, and the police are going to get involved. Other than that, if, like the example I gave before, if you're drinking a beer in the street, First of all, nobody cares. Second of all, if somebody did care, they'd say, "Oh, can you please not do that?" And you say, "Oh, okay, no problem." But they're not going to come up and assault you and, with attack dogs and all this, whatever. I'm telling you, it just doesn't happen. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you're right. Even with the, if they do have a strong kind of a military presence, normally that is something that has to do with the drug war or something like that here in Latin America. And they're not worried about just your standard tourist. They don't even look at you or address you, really. So.
Right. I mean, I've even been in countries like in Guatemala where the military pulled our bus over and came on the bus and was looking at passports. But even then, they weren't looking for us. They didn't do anything to anybody. They were, like you said, likely looking for drug dealers or someone they suspected out there, which, I might not like the drug war either. But if you're not involved in it, you're probably going to be okay when it comes to this stuff in a lot of these countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's on a lot of different laws. I mean, as far as driving laws and, having registers and all this type, it's just not the same. It's much more laid back. You're not going to, like you said, whenever you look in the rearview mirror and you're afraid about what this guy might do. I mean, because, it literally could, cause you to go to jail or be assaulted that's a pretty likely scenario sometimes when you have cops behind you, because it just gets so crazy. And I've seen it, so I just do not have that at all. And that's a huge relief.
What are some of the most common objections you hear from people about this idea of moving abroad or even traveling? What do people say when they say kind of, James, I'd love to move abroad. This sounds great. But how do people fill in that blank?
Well, I would say that definitely the number one thing is money. People want to make money, or they don't want to make money. They need to make money, right? So they don't know how to make money in these other countries. And, that is something that you need to think about, I think that, like I was talking about with these technologies, that if libertarians really want to have more freedom in their life, what they need to do is find a way to work on the internet. Not everybody can work on the internet, but a lot of people can now. There's all kinds of different jobs you can do. Pretty much any expertise that you have, you can use that to profit on the internet. Set up a website, set up a course, set up a membership site, or freelancing or something like that. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to, live as an entrepreneur, work when you want to work. You get big tax advantages for that. And not only that, but you can move out, and move where you want to, vote with your feet, okay, and go and choose a place that you prefer to live. And then you also get tax advantages for doing that. I think that making money is the number one problem that people have, and I think that it's very available for people if they would just look into it. Yeah, some of the other ones is, language. Okay, people have to get past the language barrier. There are places that, sometimes I think it's better for people if the language is a problem. They say, I don't know, Latin America, for instance, there are some places that have more expats or, have a history of Americans coming there that might be easier to kind of ease into if you're worried about a language barrier. And I don't know. I guess that's the biggest thing definitely is money. That's the biggest problem for people.
Yeah, and as far as language goes, I mean, there's probably about a maybe 8-year gap between the last time I took a Spanish lesson and the first time I really started seriously traveling around Central America. And you would be surprised how quickly a lot of this stuff can come back to you, because I found myself, maybe not having deep philosophical conversations, but without much practice, I was able to get around Spanish-speaking countries with relative ease, just speaking my remedial Spanish combined with, almost everywhere you go, a lot of people do speak at least some amount of English because there are so many English-speaking people traveling around the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's, it's fear, a lot of people put up, different reasons, or they try to rationalize why it is. But I think that it's just, it's fear. I think that once you go, I've been to plenty of countries where I don't speak the language, and you can get around just fine. I mean, it's not a big deal, really. And, luckily, people that are listening to this program, they speak English, and it just happens to be a language that you can get around the world and without too much trouble,
Sure, I mean, I spent 3 weeks in Thailand and I don't speak a lick of Thai, so these things can often work out. Now, that's probably a unique case because it's such a touristed area, but it does seem to apply in almost everywhere you travel, that even if you can't speak a language, there are ways that people will find to communicate with you because they're trying to provide businesses, whether they're taxi drivers or people that pick you up from the airport or whatever. These people all have found ways to communicate with travelers themselves, so right. It all tends to work itself out on this stuff. Another one I kind of hear a lot when I talk about traveling abroad, besides just the money, and this seems like a silly objection to me, but people will say, well, yeah, but I want to have a family and raise kids. And then I'm like, so you can only do that in the United States? I mean, there seems to be this idea that the rest of the world is this savage wasteland, this sort of post-apocalyptic third world wasteland that you just can't actually live a reasonable life in unless you just want to be a whiskey-drinking, free-willed, solo dude. But that's not the case at all. I mean, there are obviously people having kids all over the planet and raising them just fine. So do you ever hear like any other weird objections like that just don't even make sense to you?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, every once in a while, if you get somebody that's worried about the world going to hell or, the global economy collapsing or something like that, they'd say, well, if I go there, then, everybody's gonna, I'm gonna be the outsider and I'm gonna be the first one that everybody comes after. So I don't know. I think that's that's a kind of a scenario that there could be a lot of things that could happen, and it's hard for me to even. Yeah,
I mean, we might get hit by an asteroid tomorrow too, but
yeah, exactly.
Shouldn't affect our day-to-day decisions.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I mean, about as far as like starting the family thing, I mean, it depends on what people are looking for. But there are lots of people, and they've been doing this for years. I guess maybe 50 years ago or so, it was mostly military people that would go to Japan and go to other places, and they would find a wife over there. Because I mean, there's also I think kind of an antagonism between the sexes in the United States that you don't really get in other countries. So if that is something that people are that they don't feel comfortable with, and they're looking for something maybe different or more traditional or something, then that would be probably be better to look for that outside of the United States. And as far as it depends on how people want to raise their kids. I know here where I live, there's several private schools that are much, probably 1/10 of the price of a private school in the United States, and you can afford to hire a tutor. You can. There's all kinds of classes, art classes, and all kinds of stuff that people, and that's very open here. Everybody's likes that idea between mixing private school with tutors, with homeschooling, with different types of classes, and it's very kind of eclectic. And so, anyways, yeah, I think that there's a lot of options to have a family outside of the United States as well.
James, this kind of ties into an article you recently wrote on the Borderless blog, and we'll link to this, of course, in the show notes as well. Talking about, Silicon Valley debt slavery. Is this the new American dream? And you're sort of looking at a question posted on Quora, breaking down, what it's like making around 120 to 130 grand in the U.S. in Sunnyvale, California as a software engineer. It's just kind of one example of a case. So could you just kind of break that down really quickly for us and look at how people might say, well, look, I got to stay here in the United States because I can make a 6-figure salary. I'm a software engineer. I can make really good money here. So this is where I got to stay. But can you sort of just relate your breakdown of that and relate it to maybe like the kind of expenses you might have in, say, San Miguel de Allende?
Yeah. Well, it's a general, I'm sorry, I make generalities when I talk about this. A lot of people say, oh, well, that's not true. That's not always true. No, it's not. Okay. But I know so many people, almost everybody that I know that's still in the United States, kind of living how I was before 2008, are still up to their eyeballs in debt. And I just can't understand it. This is one of the reasons that I left the United States. And like I said, when I went underwater on the property there, and I tell you what, man, actually just getting rid of that debt, living in a place that you don't need to always worry about all these bills, about all these types of things, it is such a load off your mind. I mean, it really changes your attitude. It changes your life for the better, for sure. And yeah, I just don't see how this system of perpetual debt can persist. It still blows my mind. I mean, I don't know how this is all going to work out, but I don't know. I don't like to go too much talking about it because I haven't been, back in the United States for a long time. And all I do is talk to my friends on the phone and stuff. But it seems to me like this whole thing is being pushed on dead. And it's a bad psychological thing to have. You got all these people with, they got a nice car and they got a nice house and all this stuff. But, I don't know, I don't know how deep down, how happy they really are and how much time, leisure time they have to explore the subjects they want to and do the things that they want to and how happy they really are. So, it's something that I like to point out just because it's something definitely in my life that was a big before and after. And I would like to, show other people that there is another way. I think that probably my life where I'm living now is maybe 1/3 at most 1/3 of what I was living on when I was living in the United States. The cost of living is probably 1/3. So, and it's just much more laid back, and it takes a while to get used to that. But I think that overall it's a positive thing, and I wrote that Silicon Valley debt slavery because, that seems to be one of the few places in the United States where there's types of innovation and where some of the best and brightest go. That's where kind of the rock stars of the millennial and the X generation are going into these technology areas because that's where you can actually do stuff, and I mean that. For example, like you can't really innovate so much in energy. You can't really innovate so much in, say, airplanes and all these different types of things. But, the internet is still largely kind of wide open. It's not overregulated. And so people go there. And so you would think that, other than, okay, obviously there's some huge billionaires that are coming out of this, but, that's a very small percentage. But what about the other people? What about, just software engineers and stuff like that? You would think that after 10 years of, experience there, that this would be a wonderful life and all, and all this stuff. And I found a few examples. I pointed out one in that article, but there were many examples of people on that thread that they'd finally gotten to the pinnacle of this, in this area, and they were just running on a treadmill, and they were up, with their mortgage, and they had no savings and. One medical accident, one thing that happened to them or their family, and they're done. They're bankrupt. So I think that there's a better way, and it's becoming easier and easier for people, and that's what I try to help people with at the Borderless blog.
What are some of the top countries for expats out there? Obviously, Mexico is where you've chosen to settle down, so that's probably one on your list. But what are some of the best countries that Americans often flock to?
Mexico is a good first place to go for a lot of people. It's a good kind of dip your toe in the water. It's not too far away, and there are places with lots of expats there, and you can get around with not knowing very much Spanish. I don't know that I'm necessarily kind of settled here. My parents are here now, so that's something. But there are definitely areas that more. If you look at the trends of digital nomads or expats and stuff like that, you can see where people are going. A lot of people go to Thailand, Indonesia. Medellin, Colombia. I have not gone there, but a lot of people seem to be going there.
I've been to Medellin, and it's awesome. I love it. The weather's perfect. The people are amazing, and that's one of the places that's been on my personal list I've been building. So.
Yeah, I definitely need to go, and I've been told that. So that's probably maybe the next place that I'll be going. Berlin, Barcelona. There's all kinds of places, and it seems to kind of change, which I like that. I like that when policies change, when the demographics change, then that's the whole idea, is that we can also go. That's what it's about. It's about voting with your feet, right? So, right now I like San Miguel de Allende because I know people here. I can get business done here. My parents are here now, and I have a studio and. It's okay for now, but say that something happens, say that there's a policy change that I don't like or something like that. Well, there's nothing that's keeping me from just packing up my stuff and going somewhere where that I'm treated better or that I enjoy better, So yeah, for now, I think that those are some good ones. And we go over all these different ones. And another thing is that where you live and then where you set up residency and then where you have a citizenship, these are all different questions, so you don't necessarily want to, live somewhere and then get a citizenship there or get a residency there or have your business incorporated there. You want to think about all these different things strategically as to, what policies are there and, what scenario is better for you. So kind of structure it in that way. It can change. And, that's one of the great things about today is that you can be more mobile and, not be trapped.
James, before I let you go, why don't you just give everybody the full roundup of how they can find your work at the Borderless Podcast, and feel free to plug away at anything else you got going on.
Sure, yeah. Check out the Borderless Podcasts on iTunes, and it's borderlessblog.com and borderlesspodcast.com. You can get on there, and once you get on there, if you see the button free instant access, that'll give you access to we have Facebook group. You're on there, Mark, and we're trying to grow the base here. You also get some free ebooks and stuff like that, and I also have set up what's called the Borderless Society, where it's a membership site, and there's a full course on how to do these different strategies, and that gets updated every month, and also a full forum of people all over the world, experts in different areas, and keep up on all this all this stuff going on, because I definitely think that this trend of being a digital nomad or perpetual tourist, this type of thing, permanent tourist. This is not going anywhere. This is growing, and I think that definitely with libertarian-minded people, that they should get on this. Because this is where everything's going, and this is where you're going to find more liberty in your life than you will anywhere else.
James Guzman, thank you so much for joining me today on the Lions of Liberty podcast. I wish you the best of luck with everything you got going on with Borderless and with your worldly travels, and I hope you can inspire some people to follow suit here today.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on, and hope that we can get together someday. Maybe you can come down here and check it out.
Absolutely, man. James Guzman, it's been a pleasure. Take care, man.
Take care.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my discussion with James Guzman. Be sure to check out the Borderless blog and the Borderless podcast, both valuable resources. I've got my own thoughts about world travels to share with you in just a moment in the last roar. But there's one thing, a traveler, and I can tell you from experience that if you're traveling around, there's one thing you can never have enough of, and that is t-shirts. You're always running out of t-shirts, always trying to buy new t-shirts. Well, you can load up on t-shirts by heading over to libertymaniacs.com. Check out the brand spanking new electoral dysfunction line. Let people know what you think about politics. That's right, I'm telling you to literally wear your political beliefs on your sleeve. It's a great way to make new friends when you're traveling, great way to start new conversations, great way to fill that backpack up for your first trip overseas. And hopefully this show might have inspired you to take on. So head over to libertymaniacs.com, load up on some new teas, and use discount code Lions of Liberty, all one word, at checkout to get 10% off your entire order. And whether you're traveling abroad or just sitting pretty here at home, it's always important to have a plan for your health. Now, I know the ACA, Obamacare, it has made dealing with health insurance even more of a nightmare than it was before. And if you're anything like me, I'm a freelancer, I always purchase my own insurance. Your premiums and your deductibles have skyrocketed since this stuff started taking effect. But there is hope, my friends. There is hope because our friends at Health Excellence Select are here. They have arrived to help you guys deal with all this stuff, and they're going to do so in a few ways. They're going to help you enroll in a health sharing plan where people voluntarily come together to share each other's medical costs. They're going to get you a personal healthcare assistance. They're going to give you 24/7 Skype access to doctors. They're going to do it all at a much cheaper cost than you're paying for your Obamacare insurance, most likely. There's only one way to find out, my friends. That's to head over to lionsofliberty.com/health, or you can give my good friend Jeff Cantor a call at 440-283-6849. And guys, as I said, there are so many reasons to go abroad. We discussed many of them today. It doesn't mean necessarily everyone needs to move abroad. I mean, not everybody's going to be a James Guzman and be a world traveler and live outside the United States. A lot of people have a lot of good reasons that they want to stay here. Hey, I'm still here right now, but I've certainly pondered the thought of moving overseas, and it's certainly something I continue to ponder. And the Borderless blog has been a great resource, as well as the Borderless podcast, for helping do that. I cannot recommend these resources enough if you're thinking about moving abroad or just traveling in general. They're truly invaluable. And now, for myself, I mean, a lot of you might be intimidated by going to travel. You might say, I don't know any other languages, I never traveled before. That's a big thing that holds a lot of people back. I've never done it before. Well, we never walk before until we walk. We never do something, until we do it, quite logically. But it's something I want to encourage people to do, because I didn't travel a whole lot growing up. I wasn't really encouraged to travel after college. In a lot of other countries, in Europe, in Australia, a lot of people are encouraged to basically, they call it a gap year. They take a year between high school and college specifically just to travel the world, just to see what's out there. And a lot of people might say, well, I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to just go traveling the world. Well, I mean, it sounds like this glamorous thing that only the elite of the elites can do, but there are ways to travel very, very inexpensively. And I know what traveling's a lot cheaper than a year at a United States college, that's for sure. And I'm not saying people shouldn't go to college, but it's not the worst idea in the world to go check out the world a little bit. I mean, I spent a semester overseas in Manchester, England when I was in college, and that was an amazing experience just to even find out from people that speak the same language, that have a similar culture in many ways, but just to find a different viewpoint and to get the ideas thinking that way, because you really are in a bubble here in the United States. Even on social media, all of our friends are kind of looking at the same things, talking about the same things. We can get very much trapped in bubble zone. It's very easy to do. And traveling overseas really does give you the opportunity to meet new people and to, more importantly, experience their different worldviews, experience where they're coming from. Now, we might think we have all the answers out there. We might think we have everything figured out philosophically. Me, personally, I don't think we can ever have everything figured out. I think we always need to be digging deeper and looking further at our own positions and searching more for the truth. But one way to search is by literally searching the world. Because meeting other people from totally different cultures that come at things from totally different political perspectives can really help you see, not just see the world in a different way, but to understand the viewpoints of other people. Just because we disagree with other people doesn't mean they're bad people, doesn't mean they're terrible people. And I really think traveling, not to get all John Lennon on you guys, but if everyone went traveling the globe, I don't think we'd have so much fighting. I don't think we'd have so many wars, because what you really realize is when you land in a new country and you see, oh my God, I'm just shocked. This is so different. This is so crazy. It's so weird. And you're disoriented at first. And then, you start to get more comfortable. You start to communicate with people, even if you don't speak their language. You quickly realize there's a lot of ways to communicate with people, even if you don't speak and understand every word they're saying. It's truly a growing experience that anybody should take. And I didn't really travel outside my semester abroad until my mid to late 20s, when finally I just started getting the itch. I started saying, I know there's a world out there. I didn't think I could afford to travel either. I thought I just don't have the money. I just started out after college. I was working low-paying jobs, barely paying my rent. I lived out here in Los Angeles. Where am I going to find the money to go traveling the globe? But when you do a little research, you realize, unless you want to stay at 5-star hotels everywhere you go, if you want to do that, you need a lot of money. But you can travel very, very inexpensively. And if anyone wants more advice on that, feel free to hit me up, Marc, M-A-R-C, at lionsofliberty.com. You can also ask us questions in our private group on Facebook, the Lions of Liberty Forum. Just search for that in your little Facebook search bar. We're also going to link to it, of course, in the show notes for today's show, lionsofliberty.com/150. We're also linked to everything we discussed in the show today, including, of course, the Borderless blog, the Borderless podcast, and all the articles we discussed as well. Of course, join us on social media in so many ways. In addition to our private group, you can follow our main Facebook page, facebook.com/Lions of Liberty. Follow us over on the Twitter, at Lions of Liberty. And here's the part where I beg and plead, if you enjoy this show, please do share it with your friends and family. You can share it on your social media. One tweet can reach thousands of people. That's how we're going to grow this thing. I don't have a massive marketing budget. All I've got are loyal fans out there that tell people about the show, that spread it through word of mouth, that tell people about all the ways they can hear the show, which of course include right here at lionsofliberty.com. Every single Monday and Thursday, you can find us on iTunes, find us on Stitcher Radio. You can hear us on the weekends, 6 p.m. Eastern, every Saturday and Sunday at libertytalk.fm, and throughout the week on the Liberty Radio Network at lrn.fm. And if you do subscribe on iTunes, I would ask you to also stop by, take a minute to give us a 5-star rating. Hopefully it's 5 stars. I don't want you wasting your time with less than 5-star podcasts, guys. We're a 5-star podcast if you're a listener of mine, as far as I'm concerned. So drop over, give us a 5-star rating, and leave us a great review. If you have a bad review, don't leave it. I don't want you to do that. But guys, thank you so much for getting us here to 150 episodes. I'm not going to say it's been easy. I started off having no idea how to podcast, and now I have just barely an idea how to podcast because this is not my main gig. This is not what I do. I've done it with the help of so many great people. My amazing editor, John Daubert, all my Lions of Liberty cohorts, Brian McWilliams, John Odermatt, some of the guys that have supported us along the way, Howie Snowden, of course, our legal counsel, Juan Rico. All these guys have helped and contributed to grow this show, and you can be a part of that as well by sharing this thing with your friends, by subscribing, by telling the world all about the Lions of Liberty podcast. And you can tell the world because you're hopefully going to be inspired by today's show to literally go around traveling the globe, and hopefully maybe I'll get you some Lions of Liberty business cards. You can hand them out to all the new friends you make in your travels. Until next time, folks, live long and live free. Editing and mastering by Johnny Daubert. Give your show the Daubert effect. Johnny53 at gmail.com. That's Johnny